All right, good morning, everyone. We will go ahead and get started.
Winna, I just want to make sure Dr. Seth Foldy is joining us today, and he's here. Great. I saw that he was having challenges with the sound.
Yeah, he just got in.
Great, terrific. Well, good morning and welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here. And we also want to thank Dr. Seth Foldy for joining us from Denver Health to share more about the current health conditions in our community. We'll welcome him in just a few moments after I share some updates from DPS. So tomorrow, we're really excited to welcome back all of our elementary school students who have selected in-person learning. We know this has been a really challenging year for all of us, but in particular for our elementary school students, many of whom really have struggled with remote learning. Last week, we did announce our plans to continue to move forward with in-person learning for elementary school students whose families selected that for them, because we definitely see that there continues to be a lower rate of COVID cases with that age group, significantly lower transmission. And at the same time, we're very disappointed to announce delaying our in-person learning for our secondary students. We'll evaluate the conditions at the end of this month to make a determination about potential return in November. And that is definitely a reflection of the rising rates of COVID in our community, and knowing that older students are at higher risk of both contracting and spreading COVID. As always, we continue to work very closely with our partners at Denver Health and the Denver Department of Public Health and the Environment to monitor the conditions here in our community and what that means for our schools, our school teams, our staff members, and our students. We do want to share that our COVID dashboard is now live. This is a DPS-specific dashboard that tracks positive cases among staff and students, including the current number of individuals quarantined due to contact with COVID within DPS and which schools are currently impacted. While it's not intended to show data that are indicators of wider community spread, we do want to make this information publicly available for transparency purposes. We update this data twice weekly on Tuesdays and Fridays, and so there may be a little bit of a lag time in between those times. We are working very closely with all school communities to have current and up-to-date information anytime there is a case of COVID within a school community or one of our departments. Now I'd love to be able to turn it over to Dr. Foldy to share some updates about the health conditions in our Denver community right now.
Can you hear me? I am struggling with audio today.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Very good. Briefly, there has been a continued increase in COVID cases, both across Denver, across Colorado, and across the nation over the last week. That seems to be broadly affecting many populations, many age groups. You may recall that we were experiencing some outbreaks in college-aged students, or at least people of college student age, a couple of weeks ago. That has continued to some extent, but there is more spread of COVID among other populations, primarily older populations than college students, over the last couple of weeks. Fortunately, at this point, we are still seeing fairly low rates, case counts and case rates per population of COVID in younger populations, and particularly the 0 to 9 age group. We're seeing less than half a case per 1,000 youngsters of that age. And also in the 10 to 19 age group, relatively low rates in our community. This is the first time I've done such a briefing, so if there are additional questions at the end of the meeting, I'll be happy to do what I can to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Foldy. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you to Dr. Foldy, and thank you to our partners at Denver Health. Just as a reminder, we do meet with them very frequently, once a week, in a virtual meeting and then have continual contact as we're working on the safe reopening of our schools.
Awesome. All right, so we'll open it up for Q&A. Okay, our first question is from Jerry. I'm not sure who you're with, but go ahead and unmute if you'd like to ask your question. Not sure if you're able to unmute, but I'll go ahead and ask this for you. And I believe it's if ages 10 to 19 cases are low, why not resume high school sooner?
So thank you for the question. You know, as we shared last week, Dr. Berman and Dr. Federico have been advising us on our safe reopening plans for our schools and for our students. We definitely see that elementary school students are at a significantly lower rate of COVID cases than the general population at large. And so we do feel very committed to being on a pathway to opening up our elementary schools with very minimal disruptions in cases of COVID needing to close a classroom for a quarantine. For our middle school and high school students, we definitely see an increase in the number of cases, just like we see in the community. And at this point, our concern is that the possibility of disruptions, I do want to stress we have very minimal evidence of COVID being spread inside of our schools. We've taken lots of safety measures and precautions so that we can help avoid that. But the concern is that there would be more COVID cases of people coming into our schools at the secondary level. That would cause more disruptions, more classrooms needing to be quarantined because our secondary students have more movement than our elementary school students. It has the potential to have a greater level of disruption. And we're concerned that disruptions will actually impede our ability both to offer quality instruction and potentially while we're in person could be a distraction from the really important work of implementing what we call the DPS 5. Those are all the health and safety precautions that we're requiring that everybody follow to make sure that we don't spread COVID while we're in school.
Thanks. Our next question from Erica at Chalkpeak. Go ahead, Erica.
Yeah, thank you. Looking through the dashboard, and thank you for making all that information publicly available. There are a small number of schools that have sort of a larger number of cases in that 4 to 6 range, and I was curious if any of these are considered outbreaks.
So thank you. We do monitor outbreaks really closely, and we do want to stress that we actually are reporting all cases of COVID, including cases of COVID that are for our students or staff members who are in a remote setting, because we know that there are times, for example, when secondary students who are in remote come into the school for things like athletics, for practices, for things like food pickup for the weekend, for remote learning centers, things like that. So we do want to stress that we are reporting all cases of COVID within the DPS community, both for staff and students in person, as well as in remote. Anytime there is a case where we can determine that there were 2 people in the same classroom or cohort who at the same time have COVID, that is considered an outbreak. At this time, I believe we have 2 cases currently that we are investigating to determine if they are considered outbreaks or not. And just to be clear, there are times, for example, when there may be multiple children in a family in different classes at the same school. If it is determined that those cases are from the home and not from transmission at school, we're seeking confirmation that that's not considered an outbreak, that really is just one case from a family as opposed to in the school. And so there's a little bit of both of those things happening right now. We work closely with the Denver Department of Public Health and the Environment on outbreaks. And we're right now in the process of determining if we have any outbreaks from information from over this weekend.
Thank you. Next question, Deb Stanley at Denver 7. Go ahead, Deb.
Just wondering what we've learned, what the district has already learned since you brought back kindergartners and first graders.
Yeah, so I think there are some really great examples of how things are working well. And so have heard from lots of teachers. In fact, I was with our teacher advisory council last night, and a kindergarten teacher on my advisory council was just sharing how much he appreciates the opportunity to be in person. Remote learning, particularly for our youngest children, is really hard. And so we definitely are finding that it is much easier to get into the routine in school in person, and all of the supports that kids are, I think, really hungry for are so much easier to deliver in an in-person setting. We are also finding that our students are adapting really effectively to the new health and safety protocols. We're not really finding significant issues with students wearing masks, for example. I know that was something that lots of people had concerns around. But we're definitely finding adherence to that is really high. And so that's really important. And we really do want to continue to stress the importance of for adults of adapting to our new normal. And so we really are encouraging adults to continue to use technology for staff meetings, things like that, and really limiting the amount of time people are spending outside of their classroom with adults to very minimal.
Thanks. Next, Ginny from CPR. Go ahead, Ginny.
Yes, I just wondered how many students roughly are in elementary school students are in school now, and how many expected to return next week?
So great. So thank you. So our overall numbers at the elementary level are right around the 70% who have selected in person for return in schools. Obviously, it really differs depending on where you are in the city and what neighborhoods. We have seen for sure that our Latinx and African American communities have selected virtual learning at a higher rate than our white families. And so depending on the part of town, there may be some pretty significant differences. It sort of maps, I think, to the experiences that we've seen, and Dr. Foley can certainly speak to this, that Latinx communities, African-American communities have been more heavily impacted by COVID. And so I understand the families that are more cautious about in-person learning for sure. And so this coming week, starting actually tomorrow, we'll begin welcoming back our 2nd through 5th graders in all of our elementary schools. And so we'll be able to give a more robust accounting of the numbers of kids who are returning in person.
Okay, and I don't think I see any other questions.
And if I could just wrap up, I do want to just assure the public, both our family members, our students who I think are really anxious to be back in school, and our teachers, our staff members, we are going to continue to work really closely with our local health experts on our returning plans. We're always going to put health and safety at the top of our priorities because we know how important that is. And we really want to balance that with what we're seeing in terms of COVID within our community. And so it is really important to name that so far to date, we have less than 1% of our student population and our staff population who have cases of COVID right now. And even more significantly less than that, where we think there could potentially be exposures that have led to transmission within our schools. As I mentioned, we have a couple of cases that we're looking into right now to seek clarification of if it is an outbreak or not. In a district with over 90,000 students, to be at that point, I think really is a point of celebration and success, because we know how important in-person learning is for our students. And so whenever we can offer in-person safely, our commitment is to go forward and do that. And whenever we consider it to be at a level where the risk is too high, we definitely will make a decision in the interest of the health and safety for everyone.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you to everyone, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thanks all.